My eight Black Hands podcast mate Ray asked me about this lesson that I did a while ago, and I had to go find it. And two, I have been seeing tweets and posts that say that white folks never act up like this on American soil, and this is crazy and all that stuff. I'm going to tell you that white rebellion on this soil is American as apple pie. And I did this lesson. Here's the thing, though. I did this lesson in June, okay? It's something that you all need to understand and note. This is when you couldn't go to barbershops. And June feels like it was 7.5 years ago, okay? So just know that I was not being held captive when you see how crazy I look. And hopefully you enjoy the history lesson, and whether you can finish it all or whatnot, bookmark it, you can come back to it, but I offer a few different instances that we need to be aware of as people, and just as American people, whatever race you are, all right? This stuff is not new. So there's that. I will play the movie now, and even though the movie will be playing, I will still be monitoring comments, so leave your comments, and I will be interacting with them. But enjoy, all right? Hi, I'm Dr. Charles Cole III, and today I'm going to give you a slight history lesson, brought in part by the History Channel. Now, look, I got this policy that I'm going to speak truth to my people without code switching, changing anything, just trying to target folks. I don't change things up for whoever else is in the room. But if you get to hear the message, then why not listen? I just watched the president say, and I quote, that he is strongly recommending that governors deploy the National Guard in sufficient numbers that they dominate the streets. He's going to dominate the streets. Today, I saw a few posts from young people. One says something to the effect that this is our first time fighting back, and they were from Oakland. It was hard to watch. And the other post says something like, white people never do this. They never get violent, even though they was the cause of much of the violence today or yesterday and the day before. But after I wept for the terrible education system many Black kids are forced to attend by law, I then said I had to do something about it. So I wrote this script pretty quickly. Did some quick Google searches, and the History Channel came through for you boys. So don't you fret, young people. I'm going to answer both of those in detail, and it's going to be fun. Roll my logo. Now listen, we're about to do this brief history, and I think it's a pretty significant history. So we're going to get to it. Now, first of all, I'm from Oakland, all right? That's where I'm from. I'm an Oakland guy, all right? But I want to assure you that this is not the first time that Oakland folks have stood up. And it was very hard to watch that young person think that because, well, it's the home of the Black Panthers. And let's just say that we're known for standing up to tyranny. But even after that, there were multiple occasions where justice was ignored and people in Oakland took to the streets. I can actually say this because, well, I was there. This is when the freeway got shut down. I was right there, and this was when some other craziness happened, but this is from 2014. And that's me. So, it's hard that when somebody from Oakland is not aware of the history, the storied history that they're from, it just shows how much we are failing our young people as far as education is concerned. All right. But I got evidence. All right. So first there was 2010 in the wake of Oscar Grant when he was murdered. Then again, in solidarity with the pictures that I'm showing you, when the St. Louis grand jury decided not to charge Officer Darren Wilson for the murder of Mike Brown. There was indeed civil unrest. See, that's me. Those 3 cops. This is when I first learned how to meme. And those cops made sure that they told me if I moved from that step, which they placed me on, that they would beat the shit out of me. So myth 1, my precious young person, myth 1 is busted. But let's get to the other one, all right? Myth 2. White folks never violently protest. I want to assure you that is not the case. Now, since our schools have failed to show white Americans as anything other than saints that give Native Americans turkeys and blessed us savage Negroes by bringing us to this country, I take no offense at your level of wrong. Just your level of wrong. Being wrong is what I would say. But thanks to the History Channel, I'm going to run through a few moments in history for you. I'm taking the words right from them as well. All right. Like, I got you. We ain't got to play these games. First, let's look at the Wilmington Insurrection of 1898. And if you look at that picture, you ain't seeing no darkies there. All right. I could not have rolled over and did a jig in front of that picture. On the morning of November 10th, 1898, a throng of 2,000 armed white men took to the streets of the southern port town of Wilmington, North Carolina. Spurred on by white supremacist politicians and businessmen, the mob burned the offices of prominent African-American newspaper, sparking a frenzy of urban warfare that saw dozens of blacks gunned down in the streets. As the chaos unfolded, white rioters descended on City Hall and forced the town's mayor to resign, along with several black aldermen. By nightfall, the mob had seized full control of the local government. Some 60 black citizens lay dead, and thousands more had fled the city in panic. This happened. This is what was going on in the streets. While it took the form of race riot, the Wilmington Uprising was actually a calculated rebellion by a cabal of white business leaders and Democratic politicians intent on dissolving the city's biracial majority Republican government. Now, for people that don't understand political science history here in this country, there was a flip in parties. Republicans used to be the party of the inclusion and the folks that fought to end slavery. And Democrats used to be the racist, I hate black people type folks or whatnot. There was a shift in history. And if you need me to, I can share that at some point as well. But once in power, the conspirators banished prominent black leaders and their white allies from the city and joined with other North Carolina Democrats in instituting a wave of Jim Crow laws suppressing black votes. Despite its illegality, state and federal officials ultimately allowed the power grab to proceed unchecked, leading many historians to cite the Wilmington Insurrection as the only successful coup d'etat in American history. In American history, the coup d'etat. That's one. But that's not it. The New York City draft riots. Oh, take a look at this, people. Only 10 days after the Union victory at the Battle of Gettysburg, New York City became embroiled in the largest popular insurrection in American history. The incident began on the morning of July 13th, 1863, when hundreds of young men poured into the streets to protest the federal draft lottery. New York was deeply divided over the Civil War, and many viewed the conscription law, which included blacks and allowed wealthy men to buy their way out of serving for $300, as a blatant civil rights violation. The demonstration quickly turned violent when the mob stormed the draft office and beat the city's police superintendent to a bloody pulp. As the protester ranks swelled with armed malcontents, the men marched through Manhattan and began ransacking and burning the homes and offices of prominent draft supporters and other wealthy elites. People, I need you to understand that there's a history of these violent uprisings long before Black folks had any kind of ability to take the streets or whatever. But let's keep going. The bedlam would continue for 4 days as rioters looted businesses, torched buildings, and brawled with police and National Guardsmen from behind makeshift barricades. Convinced that free Blacks were a threat to their livelihood, rioters also beat and lynched several Black men, demolished the homes of others, and even set a Black children's orphanage ablaze. I don't know if that picture behind you burning is the orphanage, but these white folks was wildin'. Finally, on June 16th, some 4,000 federal troops marched into the city and put the uprising down by force. While the draft would resume only a month later, the riots still left a devastating mark on New York. All told, the incident claimed the lives of more than 100 people and caused millions of dollars in property damage. Before we leave here, I need you all to understand, people seem to think that antebellum United States, where it was the South was racist and the North was these freedom fighters that love Black people. It is not true. There were just different types of hate and there was different types of racism. So get that thought out your mind. It was so much hate and racism that there was the New York City draft riots of 1863. Okay. Are you still with me? Let's finish the history lesson. In 1921, the winding hills of Southwest West Virginia played host to the largest and bloodiest labor dispute in American history. At the time, the coal-rich region operated under the thumb of powerful mining interests who employed thuggish private detectives to harass any workers who tried to unionize. Tensions boiled over in August 1921 after company agents assassinated a pro-union lawman named Sid Hatfield. In response, as many as 15,000 miners, many of them World War I vets, armed themselves and set off to confront the coal tycoons and organize their fellow workers. Again, this is not Black people. This is not us. Just need you to understand what's happening, all right? When they approached Blair Mountain in Logan County, the army of miners clashed with a force of around 3,000 defenders, marshaled by an anti-union sheriff named Don Chaffin. As the miners advanced up the mountain, they were met with punishing rifle and machine gun fire, and Chaffin's forces even used a small air force of biplanes to drop explosives and tear gas. The battle raged for several days before federal peacekeeping troops finally arrived on the scene, at which point most of the exhausted miners returned to their homes or surrendered. By then, over 1 million rounds had been fired, and an unknown number of men, estimates from 20 to more than 100, had been killed. Oh, these savages. Look at this savage behavior. Even in the picture, they like, look, man, you about to pick up this rifle and you about to go fight. But our kids need a history lesson, so let's continue, shall we? This next one is one of my favorite. This is the Richmond bread riots of 1863. By the third year, the Civil War had taken a bitter toll on the Confederacy civilian population, right? With their supply lines choked off and inflation soaring, many southern cities erupted in mass revolts. The largest of these bread riots unfolded in the Confederate capital of Richmond, Virginia. On April 2nd, 1863, a group of armed, half-starved women, yes, white women, this is ran by white women, they descended on the state capitol and demanded to speak to Governor John Lecter. When Lecter shrugged off their concerns, the hoop-skirted mob marched down one of the city's major thoroughfares, commandeered several supply carts, and began violently ransacking warehouses for food. All right? The rioters' numbers quickly grew into the thousands as more desperate men and women took to the streets, many of them chanting, "Bread or blood." Ignoring the protests of city officials, they broke down the doors of private businesses and supply homes and made off with food, clothing, jewelry, and other valuables. According to some account, Confederate President Jefferson Davis even addressed the crowd, tossing coins at rioters and pleading, "You say you are hungry and you have no money. Here's all I have." These people looted, and these white women looted and destroyed businesses so much that the Confederate president took all his money out of his pockets and threw it at them and said, "Please leave." The riot finally ended after the city's public guard arrived and threatened to fire on the crowd. Some 60 members of the mob were arrested, and the city would later place artillery pieces in Richmond's business district as a warning against future uprisings. But remember, white folks don't loot, they don't riot, they don't do any of this stuff. If you watch Fox News, okay? If we watch people out there. Let's continue. I'm not done yet, and this is only a handful. The Battle of Athens in 1946, a group of veterans and disgruntled citizens went to war. They went to war with the local government of Athens, Tennessee. The small farming community has spent the 1940s dominated by a crooked political machine led by Sheriff and legislator Paul Cantrell. He was known to rig elections in his favor through ballot stuffing and voter intimidation. All right, he was out here wilding. Corruption ran rampant until 1945, when hundreds of young men returned to Athens fresh from the battlefields of World War II. After they experienced repeated harassment by law enforcement, the ex-GIs organized their own political party and ran several veterans for local office in the hopes of ousting Cantrell and his cronies once and for all. The battle unfolded during a tense election day on August 1st, 1946. When the veterans accused Cantrell of voter fraud, armed sheriff deputies began beating and detaining the GI's poll watchers. And one officer even shot an elderly voter in the back after Cantrell and his deputies confiscated the ballot boxes and barricaded themselves inside the local jail. Hundreds of ex-GIs armed themselves with high-powered rifles and laid siege to the building. The two sides traded fire throughout the night, leaving several men wounded. But the deputies finally surrendered after the veterans began lobbing dynamite at the jailhouse. The white folks threw dynamite at the jail. God damn it. The white folks that you said are meek and never cause problems and are super civilized lobbed dynamite at the jail. This is for babies, so I didn't want to curse. So when the votes were counted, the GI candidates were declared the winners and immediately sworn into office. Their upstart political party would go on to restructure local government and clean up much of the corruption in Athens. Oh. And then finally, let's get to one with the bang, baby. Shays Rebellion. In the years following the Revolutionary War, the United States plunged into a severe economic crisis. Tensions were especially high in Massachusetts, where overtaxed farmers began losing their property to debt collectors. Sounds familiar? In September 1786, a small army of disgruntled citizens organized mass demonstrations across the state, led by Revolutionary War veteran Daniel Shays. The rebel eventually armed themselves and began preventing county courts from convening in the hopes of curbing property seizures. Fearing revolution was in the air, Massachusetts Governor James Bowdoin responded by mustering a 1,200-strong militia led by former Continental Army General Benjamin Lincoln. In 1787, Shays' forces set their sights on the Federal Armory at Springfield, Massachusetts. The battle plan was botched, however, and the 1,500 rebels were pushed back by heavy artillery fire, leaving 4 men dead and another 20 wounded. Only a week later, Lincoln's militia ambushed Shays' camp at the town of Petersham and crushed the main rebellion. Small skirmishes continued for several weeks, but most of the insurgent leaders, including Shays, were eventually captured. The rebellion helped influence the adoption of a more robust central government at the Constitutional Convention later that year, but it would not be the last time that economic troubles provoked a revolt. Tax disputes later led to both the Whiskey Rebellion in 1790s and the Fries Rebellion in 1799. Okay, so I'm gonna stop it there. But myth 2, that white folks they never violently protest, it is bullshit and it's busted. All right, I need you all to understand, and I need you to hear me and listen to me. Listen to me well. What is happening and the way people are being treated and the levels of just malcontent of decades and centuries of being mistreated over and over and over again was meant to boil over. This is just 6 examples when white people got fed up with that shit, and they didn't go peacefully march. They didn't go and have conversations. They didn't do all the things you asking them to do now. No, you know why? Because in this country, white folks have taken everything they wanted by force and blood. And it ain't just the men. I just showed you in the bread shortage that women was out here getting bucked too. So before you start calling young black people savages or not in control of their emotions or any of that stuff, know that if that's true, then damn it, they learned from the absolute best in the business, white people. I hope you all have an amazing night. I hope you continue to be safe. Tomorrow, I will be hosting an episode with the Dr. Howard Fuller, who will be talking about Ernie Lacy and what happened in Milwaukee and how he led that and how it's so similar to what we're going through today. You all be safe, and hopefully you enjoyed your quick history lesson. Peace.